I'm going to walk you through an ethical decision-making process. This is a really important thing in life. You'll be, as we talked about before, you'll be facing many, many ethical dilemmas in your career. And these will make the difference, and sometimes in your survival, sometimes in your job, sometimes in just a good, healthy mind, knowing you're doing the right thing. I'm going to walk you through. Now, also, this is a significant part of the class. And one of the main assignments is going to be doing an ethical dilemma and walking through. This is kind of a trial where I'm going to take you through the path. But first we got to talk about you and your organization before we talk about the steps. We want to look at ethical decision making. I want you to look at what are really the guiding values of your organization? What does your organization stand for? Now, one of the problems is there's healthy and unhealthy organizations. They are ethical, unethical organizations, and these problems start right on the top. So first I want you to review your own mission statement. Pick it up, take a look, and many of you don't even know you have one, or you've never read it. Now I want you to take a look at it, and I want to see what are the guiding values of this mission statement. What does it stand for? This is the formal declared operating principles or norms of your organization. Now the challenge is, what's the reality? What are the informal, unwritten principles? At one hand it says this is what you stand for, but what does the organization really stand for? And then I want you to list and prioritize these values. Take a comparison in how they look. Now, as we walk through, I want you to, now here's some values, give you now you were talking about. Why values? They're distinguishing characteristics. They're what you stand for. They're declared. They're moral in nature. They're guiding beliefs. Now remember, I'm talking about your organization and you. Because before we can talk about ethical dilemmas, we need to take a good look. What is it you stand for? What are your beliefs? Now here's some examples. Fairness, faith, friendship, health, honesty, integrity, justice. As we talked about before, some are intrinsic, some are non-intrinsic values. Loyalty, and again, where they stand on the different spectrum. So take a look and list what of these values, which ones do you relate to most, and which one really describe who you are. All right. Now we're going to look at what are the meaning of a values. Take loyalty. What does loyalty mean? What does honesty mean? What does integrity mean? So when you pick the top values, I want you to not just state them as values. I want you to take them apart and say, what do I mean by integrity? What do I mean by loyalty? And as we talked about before, Aristotle breaks it down and says all values are on a continuum. And too much of anything is not a good thing. Now I'm going to say some of the intrinsic values, some of the, are in fact, can stand, integrity is such a value. How much is too much integrity or too little? But for most of the values that are non-intrinsic, they fall within a spectrum. We use trustworthiness, disloyalty versus blind loyalty. Brave is good. Being a coward's bad, and being foolhardily over-brave is stupid. Loyalty, again, it talks a little bit. And courage, all of these fall on different spectrums. What is too much and too little? And Aristotle talks about there's a middle ground. There's a balancing, or mean is where values fit. So I want you to take a look at these values and say, how does this fit what I really believe? So what are your values? Identify at least 5 of these. Pick 5, and you don't have to use a list. That's just a guiding to help you. What is it? Maybe one of your greatest values is support in your family. Maybe it's your religion. So what is it? Who are you? And then we're going to talk about this ethical dilemma. You need to apply how this truly affects you as a person. All right. So I want you to develop the principle, identify what they really mean. All right, so the value, what's the principle behind the value? Now, why values are important? They act as filters. When a situation comes up, when we look at what we stand for and look at the situation, it's a filter to help us see what the right path. They basically help us build what we're going to be doing and work on. They're individual distinctions. They're standards of behavior. So when we look at these, we can look at, does this conflict what we really believe? Is this something we would stand up at the old grandma test they talk about, and I'd tell grandma what I did and grandma would be proud of me? Or is this something that's only acceptable in the dark of night? Is this, when nobody's looking? So it gives us an idea, comparison. If you have nothing to compare right and wrong, how do you know when you're doing something right? Some would say it's just intrinsic. No, it's not. The more we understand our principles, the better we are to make good ethical decisions. All right, now I'm going to walk you through a scenario, and then we're going to talk about the steps. Now I can use many scenarios, and we can do something as simple as a speeding car, and it's a police officer who's off duty. Pull him over. Do you give him a ticket? And by the way, a ticket won't be the issue here. The big issue is the entitlement that people can do things wrong, and because you are a police officer, nobody can hold you accountable. Now, the scenario I want to walk you through is the domestic abuse. Here's the scenario. Now, so you understand, I do a lot of teaching in ethics, and in the 2-day ethics class, police officers bring their own real scenarios, present them in small groups, and then the best ones we use and present it to the whole class. This is one of them from our class. I'm going to present the scenario now. I'm going to read it. As I said, this is a real one presented. All right. You are called to domestic. Upon arriving, you are met at the door by a woman that tells you that her husband is a police officer. Okay. She states that he hit her. You can see injury. So in other words, this woman definitely has been assaulted by her husband. She tells you, this is a key part, she tells you it is not the first time, and she knows you won't do anything, but she wants him removed. So she's called before, she's asked for help before, and again, the police show up and nothing's done. So she knows you're not going to do anything because he's a police officer. All right? Your partner, tells the woman, if we arrest him, there's a consequence. You could, he'd lose his license, he could lose his job, So what do you want us to do about it? And we can take care of this, but I recommend we just call his agency. All right? She states that she loves her husband. When he's not drinking, he's great. He's not a problem. She just wants you to get out of it. She wants you to make things safe. And she gives you the name of his sergeant. Okay? Now, your partner then says that he'll write there is no report. He'll take care of it. There's going to be no police report. So what is the ethical dilemma? Now, this is the model. This is the one we're going to walk through. Now, it's a very serious one, but a very common one. And some of you actually, I'm sure, have seen the same thing in your different agencies. So let's take a look at the steps. Now, these are the steps of the ethical dilemma. First, I want to identify what is the ethical dilemma. Now, why this is important, what is he and who's facing the ethical dilemma? It's not your partner we're talking about. It's you. It would be like in the example when we talked about the racial profiling, where your partner was doing racial profiling. The ethical dilemma is you and what you're going to do. This is about you, and you are the officer and not the partner. All right? So I want you to identify what it, in fact, is the ethical dilemma. Then I want you to identify exactly what are the facts of this case. Brainstorm everything. Put it down. Domestic abuse, the injury, everything else. First step is to get a good understanding what is this dilemma. Critical facts, real facts, not ethical ones, which will separate the morally relevant facts as we go along. All right, ethical decision. Step 2. Now, of this ethical dilemma, what makes it an ethical dilemma? What are the morally relevant facts? What facts, if they didn't exist, they would be no ethical dilemma? Let's take a look at it, each of those. So we're going to list them. So what are they? If he wasn't a police officer, would there even be an ethical dilemma? So why is this an ethical dilemma? If you went to a call and this was a woman there with obvious signs of being assaulted, how would you handle this different? Or maybe you'd handle the same, but there'd be ethical consequences. These are the facts we want to separate out. Step 3. Now I want you to identify the dilemma, a conflict. What values are in conflict? That's why in the beginning we talked about the values. To have a dilemma, I have to have a conflict. The conflict, let's take something simple. Your integrity. What is your integrity worth? What would it cost for you to give up your integrity? So how important is your integrity? Remember, integrity is an intrinsic value. And you're in conflict with probably loyalty. Loyalty then becomes, what do you mean by loyalty? That takes us back to, what do the values mean? Loyalty to the individual and you don't even know them, or loyalty to law enforcement, or maybe loyalty to your family, which would take us on the conflict, because two loyalties could be in conflict. You could have loyalty to my organization, my profession, to my family versus loyalty, what, to a person who wears a uniform? Or maybe it's more of an issue of courage is in conflict versus your integrity. Because you know the right thing, but you're scared to do it because you're scared of the consequences of doing what you know is the right thing. Identify what is the conflict. As we walk through step 4, now who are the stakeholders? Now in stakeholders, I mean, I want you to brainstorm everybody that has a value in this, who are stakeholders. The woman who's assaulted, the police officer who assaulted her, his organization, your organization, you, your partner, Women Against Abuse, the county attorney. I want you to brainstorm, and what would each of those think would the proper end would be? So take it, and what you're doing is taking it apart and realizing many times ethical dilemmas aren't just between you and the person at the time. There's many people who have vested interest in this outcome. Identify each of them. Identify what their goals, what they would say is the correct answer to this situation. Now, as we continue on, I want you to evaluate. What are your options? What can you do? You could do nothing. Do what your partner wants. Just shut it up, no record, call the sergeant, get him out of there, and hope she's safe and wait for the next call. And maybe you'll be lucky you don't get the next call. You could take him to detox. You could take him to detox, notify the county attorney. You could arrest him. You don't stand alone. The county attorney reviews their city attorney. So I want you to brainstorm, what are the options, and then what do each of these options mean to the different stakeholders? In other words, if all of this is in the light of day, what are people going to say about what your choice is? But I want you to brainstorm good and bad ones, and then I want you to pick the right one you think. Now, does any of these options, conflict or violate your personal values? Very beginning, we talked about who are you. Is this wrong? Would you be okay with this when you say, here's what I stand for, and does it fit in what you believe is right, or your organization says is right? Decision making. Step 6, I want you to apply the different theories. Now, we talked about different theories. I want to look at each of the theories and how they apply. Character value. That takes us back to the beginning on your values. Now remember, character isn't something you're born with, it's something you develop and you continue to develop. And the more you do the right thing, the more it becomes a habit and you become a person of high moral character. Does it fit within this? Now remember, this is not a model. This is really looking at Aristotle talked about as people build character. Now the problem is, and I've seen it, and I'm sure you have, there's very unhealthy organizations that more and the longer you're there in that agency, the better and the higher the probability it's going to dwindle your character. And there's healthy agencies and healthy people. And even in that organization, there's healthy people you need to find. And then there's people in other organizations that totally support high moral character. Now let's look at some of the models. Deontological, we talked about it. Remember that? If it's right, it's right. Because you have no control over consequence. You don't know. Let's say, for example, you say, I'm just not going to do anything. I want her to lose her home. I don't want her husband to lose a job. And now next call is she's murdered or seriously hurt, or there's a complaint filed and you did nothing. Deontological is you have to deal with this situation, what is right and what's your duty and responsibility, because truly you have no control over the consequences. Maybe you take him to detox and maybe they get him help. Maybe the county attorney, instead of charging him, takes another path. Or maybe he should be charged and he should lose his job. And not only is this anger issue with his wife, but even in his job. Now then we take a look at Teleological, which utilitarianism is about, we have to look at the consequences of the behavior in our decisions. And it's looking at the greater good for the greater number. It deals with pain and punishment, pain versus pleasure. Now, that would say, what is the right thing to do and create the greatest pleasure for the greater number? Now, I'll walk you through each of these individual. Character, a person of high moral character would take this very serious and make sure the woman is taken care of correctly. Because she's asking for help again and again, and even once is enough. Deontological duty is very clear. And now many struggle with the deontological, and they say the greater good would be to do nothing or cover it up. No, the greater good for the one or the group is always superseded by the greater good for society and the greater good for the majority. And allowing domestic abuse to continue is a greater evil than what would be the consequences of your actions. So each of those in a different way take you to the same answer. And as you look at it, you should get to the same answer when you apply all the theories. Now remember, character is not a theory. It's really it's like community policing. It's a philosophy of life. And the more you practice it, the better you get, and the better you get high moral character. The other two are models, but both of them will take you to the same place. All right, so look at each of those and evaluate them. Now we're going to talk. So I evaluated the options. We applied the models. Now we talked about the 5 standards, and I want to look at each of them. I want you to pick one of these standards when you answer it. Just one you think applies most to this situation. But I'm going to walk you through all 5 standards. So let's take a look at police as a public trust. You're giving the power, you're giving the responsibility, you're a police officer, and with it we expect you'll take it serious and you'll do what's the right thing to do as a police officer. We give you the power to go to this domestic abuse, to handle this domestic abuse, and we expect you to act accordingly. Not use your fear of doing the right thing or protecting a colleague, which is we wouldn't protect somebody else. So public trust is a key one. Let's look at fair access. This woman, when she called, expects to be treated like everybody else, and you come and take care of this situation, not cover it up because it's a police officer. She has every right to get the same service as anybody else. Safety and security. Are you creating a safer environment for society, or are you creating a negative one when people who call for help are treated differently? She, not only in this situation, is her safety and security, but the idea and the concept as you come out with a police officer. Safety and security is really about, in your action, do you actually create an environment that is safer or less safe and secure for public, or in this situation, for her? Team building. Who are you to decide to cover it up? There's so many variables, like I said, detox, the county attorney or city attorney, their agency itself. There's so many people working together, and especially you talk about something like domestic abuse, or in many of them. And objectivity. Are you treating this different based on your relationship in law enforcement? Are you allowing entitlement that the police can do whatever they want and it doesn't matter? Now, I'm not saying we arrest everybody. I'm saying there is no entitlement that in an individual, because of a certain job, be it a doctor, be it a judge, be it a police officer, is entitled to do certain things and get away with it because of their job. And in fact, they should be held not to a lower level, but to a higher level, because if anybody should understand. I mean, if there's drugs and alcohol and other problems, you can't just cover this up. Now, as we move along, so let's evaluate, explain what is the correct thing to do. Now, I want you to apply the social contract. The social contract gives you the power to do your job. How does that fit? When you pick your one, I want you to apply that to the social contract. In other words, what gives you the right to be a police officer? What do people give up to allow you to have the power, and how does, of the 5 standards, this apply, in this case, to the social contract? All right, as we're moving along, all right, which of the ethical principles values apply to each options? I want you to look at them and apply the principles to the options and rank order them. So here's my options, and I want you to rank order them, and what is the most logical, correct thing to do? What is the right thing to do? Now, we should determine from that, what is the correct, responsible thing to do? In this case, letting them go would not be the right thing to do. Covering it up would not be the right thing to do. What is the correct moral correct thing to do? Step 10. What are the consequences now? Now let's just take on 9 for a minute. So I am going to arrest you for domestic abuse, and I'm going to inform the county attorney that I made an arrest. I'm going to inform your agency I made an arrest. This is not a one-time, and even if it was, that woman has every right to be safe in her home. What are the consequences if I did that? What are the consequences you would face? You know, what would other people say if I disagreed with you? What would they say? Let's say the other thing. Let's say your answer is, I'm going to do nothing and I'm just going to tell the sergeant. If other people knew what you did, what would be the consequences? And those that disagreed with you, what would they say? Let's say you say, well, nobody would know. Yes, they would know. Next time she's assaulted more. Or there's a civil suit and they find out you were there. There's many consequences as you don't know what's going to happen. You only have power over what you did. So with that in mind, what would people disagree with you? What would they say? You know, is anyone harmed by your action? If I do nothing, is she being harmed? So you have to look at it and weigh so much of this. Now I have an assignment for you, and the assignment is this. I want you to answer each of these questions. Then I want you to walk through, and you're going to drop this answer to this in the Dropbox. Now, you're going to join others then in a discussion of the scenario. Now, here they are, and I want you to go through each. I want you to define it. I want you to look at each of these steps as we walk through. You know, what the problems stand for, you know, the solutions. So I want you to follow along here. I'm just going to bring them up, and I want you to then take this information, answer each of the questions. You're going to post it in the Dropbox, and then you're going to join others in discussion. I won't discuss this because I want to discuss it with you online. So have a good day, and I hope this information will help you have a greater understanding and how to work with and deal with ethical dilemmas that I guarantee you will be facing many in your career. Thank you.